All right, it is Sam Sirmons of Magic 107.5, 97.5, The Real Sound of Atlanta. And today I'm having a very important conversation with the United States Surgeon General. That's America's doctor, if you didn't know, Dr. Vivek Murthy. How are you doing this afternoon?
Hey, I'm doing well, Sam. I'm glad we're having this conversation.
Absolutely. And we are going into month 20 of the pandemic, but we've made a lot of strides in the area of vaccinations, especially in our youth. So going into the Halloween season, going into the holiday season, what can you tell our listenership about the vaccine being approved for ages 5 through 11 now?
Well, Sam, we're approaching a really important milestone here, and this is a big deal. You know, I say that not just as a doctor, but as a dad of two kids who are under 12 who haven't had a chance to get vaccinated yet because they're not eligible. But the prospect of a vaccine now for kids under 12, which is what's on the table, this is very exciting. So there are 4 steps of the process. Let me tell you where we are right now. We finished the first step, which is the FDA Advisory Committee has met, has looked at the data from the clinical trials for kids under 12, and has unanimously supported the FDA authorizing that vaccine. Now, the FDA is considering those recommendations and is going to render their final decision any day now. After that, early next week, the CDC's advisory committee is going to meet to consider these recommendations, after which the CDC will make its final recommendation. So it's very possible within the next week or so, we could see final recommendations for a vaccine for kids under 12. And lastly, let me tell you this, as soon as those recommendations come, if and when that happens, we'll be absolutely ready to roll those out to children. We're ready to start shipping those vaccines immediately. We've been working hard to set up tens of thousands of locations where parents can get their kids vaccinated, from schools and doctors' offices and children's hospitals and other locations, including pharmacies. And we're also working really hard to build a national outreach and information campaign to make sure that parents can get accurate scientific information about these vaccines, also because we know that there's a lot of misinformation that's circulating out there. We don't want parents to fall victim to any of that. We want them to get the facts so they can make the right decision for their kids.
Absolutely. And speaking to a parent, has that conversation come up as them asking you about, hey, are we ready to be vaccinated? Or was it something that you volunteered and saying, hey, I want to talk to you about what's going on in the world and what we can do to help protect you?
Oh, so you're talking about my kids in particular? Yeah.
Yes.
I'll tell you, it's so interesting to me, Sam, is how much our kids absorb of what's going on, in terms of COVID. Like the other day, I overheard my 5-year-old son talking to his 3.5-year-old sister about COVID and explaining to her why we couldn't, they couldn't travel in certain places and certain planes yet because they weren't vaccinated. And it was very interesting. So I think our kids pick up a lot of information as it is. But my kids have actually asked, my older son, in fact, has asked about the vaccine, and we've told him that there might be a vaccine for him. He knows that his parents, his mom and I are vaccinated. He knows that, my parents, his grandparents got vaccinated. He saw them go and come back with a Band-Aid over their arm. So, I think a lot of kids are aware that these vaccines are out there. And I think it's important that we talk to our kids about what the vaccine means, right? So the vaccine means a couple of things. It means, number one, we can protect our kids from getting sick. And even though kids do better than adults when it comes to the worst outcomes of COVID, we've still lost hundreds of children to COVID-19 over the past year and a half. We've had thousands and thousands of kids hospitalized because of COVID, and many are struggling with what's called long COVID, which are these prolonged symptoms that can last for months of shortness of breath and fatigue. So we want to protect our kids from that. But there's another side to it too, Sam. I think it's sad we have to explain to our kids, which is that getting them vaccinated means we can also get them back to their way of life more readily. So many of our kids have had to forego seeing friends, getting together, for pizza parties and birthday parties indoors. They've had to end up being quarantined and miss school and do virtual learning as a result of that. Like, a lot of those things get better once our kids get vaccinated, because we will see fewer outbreaks, and we'll also have greater confidence that even if our kids do get sick, that their risk is much, much lower of a bad outcome if they're vaccinated.